HaShamayim of Hashem, page 20. And we were picking up from yesterday where Rabbi Yonatan was telling us that there are two kinds of mitzvot. There's what you must do, the common road, and then there's what you can do extra. But what you can do extra will never cover for what you must do. The example was, you can't pay off your debt to the bank with a box of chocolates. It's nice to bring your banker a box of chocolates, but that box of chocolates won't cover for your $3 million debt. It's not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. There was once a rabbi that I was listening to one of his classes, and after listening to this class, I wouldn't suggest anyone else should listen to his classes, but he had mentioned a very interesting topic, and said he believed that there were certain things in Judaism which were unquantifiable. And because they were unquantifiable, you're not able to actually use them in any halachic equation. I'll explain to you what I mean. He said, for example, the mitzvah of love another person like yourself. Because you can't quantify how important that is or not important. For example, I know that when the Torah says there's a positive commandment, a negative commandment, one outweighs the other one. Or when there's a biblical commandment, a rabbinic commandment, obviously the biblical commandment trumps the rabbinic commandment. The question is, how heavy does the mitzvah of loving your fellow person as yourself? How much weight does that carry? He says it's unquantifiable, and therefore I can't use it in any kind of formula. It's a mistake. He came to a mistaken conclusion. Here, I want to tell you the same thing. You very often hear people criticize, how could those people be religious? They don't even say Shabbat Shalom to me. And the assumption there is, it's not worth being religious if you can't even have the basic human decency to say good morning to somebody else. And what do people normally do? They have a few answers. The first is apologetic. I'm so sorry you had that experience. Not everyone is like that. You hear that. You hear the person say, well, at least they still keep Shabbat and kosher. And then you have the people who say, well, they're not Jewish. So all of those three answers are flawed. They're all flawed in their core. The true answer is that, their actions really don't count if they lack common human decency. What's my source for that? It's right here what Rabbi Yonatan is telling us. Rabbi Yonatan is writing this on black on white on paper. This is not just an idea that people feel in their hearts. It's an idea that is written down, recorded into Jewish rabbinic literature. You cannot ignore the common road, the road that you must take, which is being a decent human being, for the road that you want to do extra. I was once, when I was in yeshiva in Baltimore, there was a boy who used to learn very late at night. He would come back after curfew. And the rabbis realized that he was probably going to be a big scholar, and they kind of looked the other way when he broke curfew because they always knew where he was. He broke curfew to hang out in the synagogue studying Torah. So they let him be. This boy, when he would come back into the dorms at 1 o'clock in the morning, he would take off his shoes. It would be snowing outside. He would take off his shoes outside the front door and tiptoe down the hall to his room. The reason was that he understood that it's great that he wants to stay up and study Torah all night. But by marching through the hall at 1 o'clock in the morning and waking somebody up, all of the Torah that he had studied is useless. And so what before one can tell me is unquantifiable. That equation, you can't apply it everywhere. The answer is Rabbi Yonatan wrote this down on paper in order so that you may use that in any other formula that happens. Yes, if the person keeps Shabbat and kosher, but they can't even say good morning to you because they're so preoccupied, that person, I'm saying dangerous words, that person is making a fundamental mistake. It's like paying the banker a box of chocolates instead of the debt. He's so holy, but he's not really holy. He's lacking out on the entire common road. I had a student who used to wake up early in the morning to pray with sunrise. He used to wake up, but this guy, he decided that he wanted to begin praying in his room.
Wake up is
all the blessings. Yeah, and he had a certain custom. He would say them all out loud. I'm lucky his custom wasn't to make everybody else say Amen, or else it would be a whole different story. So 4 o'clock in the morning, Baruch Atah Hashem, what are you doing? You crazy? Are you out of your mind? It's nice you want to pray early. It cannot come on the expense of someone else. There's a story that I'm already forgetting. I don't remember who it was and which Chacham it was. It was a Sephardic rabbi in Yerushalayim. That his community used to say Slichot. And sharing the wall of the synagogue was an old lady. And she used to get so bothered they would come in so early and say slichot, that he actually instituted in his community not to say slichot until she woke up. Which is a crazy thing. And people have work to go to. He decided, now listen, you could argue it's fair use, I have my side of the apartment, whatever it would be. But at the end of the day, he understood that slichot are an extra. I'm coming here to ask Hashem for forgive me for this, forgive me for that, for the next thing, but the next door neighbor doesn't forgive you. So this person realized that if I'm weighing out my options, my better options, even to skip slichot, than to hurt somebody else along the way. It's for this reason Chacham Ovadia goes to the other extreme. Chacham Ovadia was asked about yeshiva boys who attend the yeshiva. Imagine they live in an Ashkenazi yeshiva, like many of us did for a long time. And Ashkenazim, they only say slichot for the week before Rosh Hashanah. And we say slichot for the month before. So in order to say slichot, now, so in Ashkenazi yeshiva, when they say slichot, they start at the same time, but they give you an extra hour to pray, because they calculate the time it will say to take slichot. But the rest of the month, you have to wake up very early to say slichot. So there were guys that had a very hard time. They were waking up early, they were sleeping through classes, they were not learning well, their kavanah wasn't in the right place, their intentions were all over the place. They're falling asleep again in the afternoon, again at night. They ruined their whole day. Chacham Ovadia said it's better for them not to go to slichot and to have a successful day than to say slichot, because they're holding on to a chocolate, they're holding on to the cookies, they're holding on to the bonus, they're not holding on to the main part, they're not holding on to what is important. He did suggest that on Mondays and Thursdays they should have their, twice a week a person can do it, twice a week a person can make time. He held that such a thing was possible. But this applies to all kinds of, I remember in yeshiva, there's an Ashkenazi custom that you might not be familiar with. In more gung-ho Ashkenazi communities, they are very observant of this. And that is the fast of Behab. Have you heard of Behab?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
This is brought down by the Rama. The Rama in Shulchan Aruch says that after Sukkot and Pesach, the assumption is that people slacked off a lot during their free time in the holiday. Spoke a lot of Lashon Hara, did all kinds of things they probably should not have done. Free time brings to a person wasting time generally leads to a person filling their time with nonsense. And the instituted a fast called Behab. Behab means bet, hey, bet. Monday, Thursday, Monday. So following a holiday, they would fast on Monday and say slichot. Thursday they would fast and say slichot. And the following Monday they would fast and say slichot. This is a real old Ashkenazi custom. It's not one to be ignored.
I used to work in Yeshiva in Denver. Used to do that.
So in Baltimore...
Even after Hanukkah.
Right. Now this wasn't my custom. I'm Sephardic. It's not my custom. But the Rosh Yeshiva ruled over there that it was much better for the boys to... They could say slichot, but they shouldn't fast, because the whole point of fasting was to make up for lost time. But if they're losing out their time now by fasting this Behab, then it's a big mistake. and therefore, Eli, look what you started. And therefore, what happened was that they decided we're going to say slichot, but we're not going to fast. And nobody fasted in Baltimore and Behab. At least not the yeshiva students. And that's a good calculation to make. What upsets me is that people are very quick to not make these calculations. We would much rather do it all, be very strict, and not take into consideration the fact that there are in every situation there's an ikar, a main point, and a tafel, an extra. I've tried very hard in this synagogue.
Finding you don't have to fast.
When?
Holiday, the fasting holiday comes.
Which holiday?
We are talking
about fasting after the Sukkot and Pesach. It's an old Ashkenazi custom. And one that comes from a very old source. It's not someone didn't wake up in the morning and come up with this minhag. It's an old minhag. But even in those communities that were very strict about this custom, the yeshiva students were exempt. This is a very important to know how to. Now, not every person makes this calculation for themselves, but the rabbis of the generation should be in touch with this. In a Bet Knesset, I find today we already have so many additions. Raul and I were learning today. We already have so many additions to the prayer book. So now it's going to come Elul, and now you want to add on LeDavid Hashem Ori V'ishi. You want to add on another Tehillim.
That
Okay,
fast
fine.
Is for the Jewish,
So
not the Jewish fast.
What?
That fast is not for the not in name of. There's no name involved. Jewish name involved. Non-Jewish fast. The fast of fast after Passover.
It is. It's the Jewish custom.
That's somebody who said that.
It's not one of the set fasts that you find in halakha. Yes, you're right. Okay. So this, I was saying about...
Baltimore.
That I know. Baltimore, what was I telling you? Oh, about adding. So you're adding in this Tehillim of David Hashem Oivishi because it's Elu. So you add it in, fine. Now you make everyone stay for another 3 minutes. On top of that, you want to say another Kaddish, because if you're adding, you have to say another Kaddish. Well, if we're already saying Kaddish, then the person, you just stole from him 7 minutes of his time. Now, in a tefillah that's all of 45 minutes long, 7 minutes is a big number. And then it's not that. Then suddenly someone has to share in the halakha for the day. You ever notice during the week here, we don't share the halakha of the day during tefillah, we always share it after the tefillah. That way someone could wrap up their tefillah and run out the door if they need to. Only on Shabbat, nobody's running anywhere. You can share the halakha of the day inside of the tefillah.
That's a different focus, because the idea you get, because I went to places like that for many years, is that, well, this is much more important than your own time.
How much can you put on a person before they break?
Really? I know.
That's the question.
Exactly.
The emphasis is incorrect. We're ready. There was a rabbi called the Chikrei Lev. Chikrei Lev was the rabbi of Rabbi Chaim Palaji. Rabbi Chaim, he writes that if it was up to him, he was already planning to cut out half of the Siddur. Prayer should start with Baruch Shama, and it should end right after Shemona Esrei, and that was it.
That's very good.
That he was going to cut it out. He said, and he was starting to do this work, and then he realized, because at least people will have kavanah. It's going to be in a bridge service, so they'll have more. Then he said he realized that people, they don't even have intention in the first place, even for one paragraph. So he said it's better that I should leave the Siddur as it is and not mess with it. But if someone were to promise me that they would really have kavanah for this part of Tefillah, I would tell them, pray from Baruch Shema until after Shemona Esrei. A person has to know not to grab onto the things that you think are extras. Focus on the main part of everything.
You're a very kind rabbi. Because back in Denver, the rabbi there used to call me up at 6 a.m. every morning when he was trying a new minyan. Every morning, 6 a.m., and I had to work till like 7, 8, 9 at night. So
okay, this is...
I was like going through the day like...
somebody once asked Harab Peretz,
I mean, it's like...
how many hours are you supposed to sleep at night? Somebody asked Harab Peretz. Said, what do you mean? So how many hours do you supposed to... He said, you're asking about me or asking about you? He said, no, Joe, what does Judaism tell you? How many hours do you sleep at night? He said, Judaism doesn't tell you, because Judaism will tell you that you need to sleep the amount of hours you need to sleep. He said the average number that our rabbis give us that are healthy are 8, sometimes 6. He said some people need 10. So the person has to know who he is. He said, oh, you need 10. It doesn't mean you go to sleep at 6 o'clock in the morning. Right? The person knows 10, so then I probably should go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night. That's okay.
But it's your Yetzirah that keeps you in bed.
So Harab said it's a lie.
Said it's
a lie.
What do they call it? That code of Jewish law?
Your Yetzirah that keeps you in bed past a certain hour. But nobody told you when to go to sleep. You can go to sleep as early as you finish praying Avit. This is the truth. The truth is that we're very hard on people. And you wonder why people are running away. People are running away. I'm not here. I'm not pushing. Notice, I'm not pushing to get rid of the common road. The common road, the 630 mitzvot, the 7 mitzvot of our rabbis. We have an obligation to keep every detail of them. But the things that we've added, the things that are... It's good that for you, this gives you an extra spiritual push. You can't expect everyone else to do it. It's not for everybody else. And even for you, it might not be good. If someone asked the rabbi, can I take on this stringency? And the rabbi said, you shouldn't ask me, you should ask your wife. He said, my wife's not a rabbi. He said, no, but your wife is going to ultimately suffer if you take on this stringency. So you have to ask her if she agrees to it or not. That is a real rabbi. I heard another rabbi give a class about this rabbi. He said, oh, he's a rabbi for women. So he only cares about the woman. What, everything in life you want to do, you ask a woman? I'm holding back the words because on Shabbat people told me I shouldn't say words about people. They're also mistaken, but it's okay. The truth is that yes, I've seen families fall apart because of Jewish observance. And it's not what it's supposed to do. So you see sometimes couples that they keep Torah mitzvot and they live such a beautiful life together. That's what it's supposed to do. Not the opposite. Not a situation where a wife is sitting at home, oh, where's my husband now? Where do you go? Oh, it's another class that's 11 o'clock at night. The fact that you have wives or significant, they let you come to a shiur is a big deal. It's a big deal. Go home and say thank you. It's not the time you come home after work is borrowed time. Your family also owns that time. It's a big... Okay, I've said enough. Let's read this paragraph inside. Vida, says Rabbeinu Avraham, you shall know, ki 10 shnot tzom, the 10 years of fasting, mitoch chasidut, out of piety, Meaning you said, I want to separate myself from this world, I just want to fast. Yitkapchu lecha, they will all be squandered, they'll all be disappearing from you. Ba'avon achila echat min hagazel u'min hagneva. They will all be thrown away because of one act of eating food or something that was stolen.
Whoops.
Or that was taken. And should I tell you what it means, stolen or taken? Do you know there are times where you come to visit somebody at their house and they were not expecting you? They were going to sit down for dinner. All of a sudden, oh, you know what, let me make you a plate. A person should say, I'm sorry, I was just planning on going, I just came to Hill. Now you're starved, you just came over work, you also want to eat. That food is a chashash gezer. It's a chashash, it's a doubt. Maybe they didn't have you in mind to be there for dinner. Of course you have to know who it is. If it's your brother, then it could be that he's happy with you coming. But a person has to be very careful. You go to someone's office, I'll take a cup of coffee. Did he offer you a cup of coffee? If he offered you, fine. And even if he offered you, figure out if he meant it sincerely.
This is very, because what we usually get is hachanasa, always is good. Do you know that one of my kids got deathly ill because a rabbi asked a sick woman to stay in my house?
Okay, so let me tell you about Achnasat Ochim.
You know, and
Our rabbis make it very
many
clear.
times.
Bringing guests into the home is your mitzvah, not the guest mitzvah. Meaning, I don't come to you and say, you know what, you have a mitzvah to have guests, so I'm going to be your guest. That's not how it works. Achnasat Ochim means your mitzvah is to invite people. Right? It's a little bit simple.
It's the guilt thing of feeling obligated. Another time there was a guy who needed a place to live and he was a total insomniac, so I didn't sleep for a week while this guy sat in my kitchen, smoked in my house.
Do you want to know what I think?
And drank coffee and bashed cups.
Do you want to know what I think about this? I'll tell you what I think about this.
Over
I have,
years.
you hear me quote Halav Peretz more than I quote anybody else.
But the leader of the community told me I have to do this.
Okay. You've heard me quote Halav Peretz more than anybody else. I consider myself a close student. I have never once sat at Rav Peretz's house for a Shabbat meal.
Really?
Yeah, you've said that more than once.
Rav Peretz does not have guests on Shabbat. Doesn't have. Why? Too many stories like that. Now, he told me once, he said he's worried. He said of all the things in his life, the one thing he's worried about after 120 years, Hashem is going to tell him, you don't bring guests into your home. So what can I do? I said, how many people can I bring to my house? They affect my children. They upset my wife. So they do avirot in front of me. So I can't handle some of these things. So I said, it's incorrect. He said, I'm jealous of those of you who have a higher tolerance than me. But I was raised on this value of Hachnasat Ochim is not a wild card. If you bring a drug dealer into your home, my friends, you are responsible for anything that comes into your home because of that. The Torah says that you cannot bring to'eva el betecha. You cannot bring anything dirty, anything ugly into your home. You have a person that comes to your home, he curses in front of your family. That's your fault that your children now know that. Don't pretend to be holy on the expense of somebody else. So Baruch Hashem, I have guests, but if I see a guest in my house that does something that's not okay, then the guest will never come back to my home. Because of something else. This is not my home. This is a community place. But if there's a person that's going to come, a person has to know.
Can you tell them to leave while they're there?
You have to also weigh out embarrassing another person. You have to weigh that as well. Are there times? Of course, there are times a person is coming in and they're, I once in my life threw somebody out of a Beit Knesset. Once. You have to weigh how these things work. And so, you shouldn't have this idea, this guilt on you. Everybody in the world, it's not true that it works that way. You as a person can be there. I told you there's a family in Brooklyn, in Borough Park, that they have overnight in their house, they have homeless people come and eat. Jewish homeless people. They come and eat at their home. At 10 p.m. Once their kids go to bed, the family puts a second dinner out on the table. It has as many people for the whole, as much as they want. But not when the kids are awake. You might say, oh, that's so disgusting. I want to see you feed a homeless person for more than 2 days in a row. People do a mitzvah, but they know that it cannot come at the expense of their kids, who they're trying to guard from certain things. You're allowed to make such a calculation. You're all men in this room. I have to tell you the truth. If a person comes to your home and they're too friendly with your wife, I see this in my community. I see this. It seems to be that this person goes to that person's house because of his wife, not even because of him. A person should make a point. This person is never coming back to my home again. You want to bring them back, so have a conversation with them. So I'm not telling you suspect your wife. Your wife, she's a holy person. Suspect him. He's the one who's the problem. You should be on the same page with your wife enough to be able to have this conversation. It makes me uncomfortable that someone comes to the house and this is how he does. Are we sounds jealous? Good. There's things in life you protect. You don't give away your social security number. Your wife, yes? I think the paragraph finishes.
Very, very intense for you, what you're saying. Because,
Good intense or a bad intense?
well, it's just I realized that I was taught to do all these things and that they blew up in my face over and over again. And I had a lot of bad things happen.
And
Just open your home, achnas v'orchim, welcome everybody in, feed everybody. I never used discernment. I was still quite young.
right.
But also I had teachers who basically made their whole purpose was that. But it takes a special person.
Well, there are. I cannot negate. There were people who were completely chesed. Their whole life is chesed, and chesed is good. Kindness is good. You also see very often that those people got hurt along the way because of their chesed, and they still didn't care. And when I think of a person as totally chesed, I think of two personalities. I think of Rabbi Chaim of Sens, who was always poor, was a wealthy man. Every penny that he got, he gave away to somebody else. His family didn't have food to eat. Every penny that he got, he gave it away. The rabbis already broke their pens. How could he do such a thing? I'm not discussing. Many years ago. Rav Shlomo Kabach was the same way. I think of a person who hugged every person in the world and who gave to every person in the world. I can't tell you, I'm afraid I'm being real. I can't tell you that Rav Shlomo Kabach's family came out the way another family would have come out. Is it because of that? I don't know if it's because of that. I believe wholeheartedly that these personalities came into the world to give. That's why they were there. If Rav Shlomo Kabach was a discerning fellow, he would not have had the influence on the world that he had. He was that personality.
He sacrificed his family to do it.
And I'm sure. And
What about that sacrifice is tikkun for the next lifetime?
that's not my see. If I do everything right, and then it happens to be that it works out that way, so okay. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I tried what I could. But if a person doesn't try what they could, they didn't use the proper judgment. That's not a sacrifice. It's negligence. You're right, the Torah doesn't require it. But there were clearly certain personalities that knew that their life mission was different.
Personality is a problem.
I don't know, I'm not going to call a person a problem, just I don't. And the problem is when that kind of personality expects everyone else to be like them. I told this recently to somebody, you live your life on a very high standard. But you can't judge other people because they don't live by your standards. You have to judge other people by what other people's standards are. You chose, okay, good for you that you chose that way. And Rabbeinu Avraham is saying that all these fasts, all these things you think you're doing that are extra, they really don't count because you are ignoring the main road. There are people who used to wear rough wool clothes in order to. They were covered, but they wanted to feel itchy all day long. That way, they were always on their toes. They were never. It's a certain kind of asceticism. It's like a certain self-inflicting pain in order to reach a certain place of holiness. There were generations that did things like this. He says that you'll lose out all the reward you got for wearing those wool clothes if once you put on a four-corner garment without tzitzit. Because the biblical mitzvah of wearing tzitzit is much greater than this idea that you got into your head of being holy. וחיי פרוש ומתבודד בהרים במשך שנים רבות נתקפחו לך אם תשאיר בלא מזוזה בית החייב בה.
You don't wear it all the time.
Yes, he's saying that if you wear a four-corner garment without tzitzit. Here I'm guilty in this Beit Knesset, and I plan to fix it this week, B'ezrat Hashem, so don't hold me to it. He said living in the mountains and meditating all day long, he says you'll lose all of those merits if in your home it doesn't have a mezuzah on the door. רק אם קרחה הדבר בשוגג או באונס, תוכל לקוות למחילה מהשם על העבר. וסעד ושמירה מפני חטאות העתיד. He said, only if you erred or were overpowered by circumstances, may you hope to receive a pardon for what you have done and anticipate divine assistance and protection from sins for a fresh start. He says, the only time a chassid who's doing all these extra levels of piety is okay, perhaps okay, is if it was a mistake. He didn't mean to. He didn't say good morning to you because he thought he was being too holy to say good morning to you. He didn't hear you say good morning. In that situation, he could hope and pray that it will be okay. But you find that the whole world today is imbalanced in this department. And Rabbeinu Avraham's words, they were not spoken verbally, they were not a thought that were in his head. He felt that this topic was important enough to dedicate a chapter to it. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue with this chapter next week. Let's go into Shulchan Aruch because I've already gone over time with this.